Hey, have you ever struggled to turn customer data into a story that grabs your executive team's attention? Today, Ania Rodriguez, CEO of JourneyTrack, shares how to transform scattered data into persuasive, executive-ready presentations. You'll discover why the emotional power of stories, not just numbers, moves leaders to act and learn practical strategies to inspire action at the highest levels. Well, I am so excited to have back on my show Ania Rodriguez, the CEO of JourneyTrack. Ania, welcome back to the show.
A pleasure to be here, Mark. Thank you so much for having me again.
My pleasure. And today I'm really excited because we're going to talk about one of the things that CX leaders tend to struggle with, and that is translating insights into executive ready presentations. That is taking all this information, like there's no shortage of data. That's never been the issue. The issue is how do I convert that into something that the executive team sees as valuable? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest skills that people don't master easily.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about having a tool like JourneyTrack, which takes the customer's journey and gives everybody a chance to view it with a visual map of what the customer's going through, that's living, active, breathing, connects the dots between different touch points in the customer journey, and can actually, if it's set up, can actually have data and numbers built into it and can be shared across the enterprise. But while that's terrific and way ahead of where we used to be with the sticky notes and bringing roll paper to a meeting and scotch taping it onto a wall, it still doesn't necessarily capture the attention of the C-suite. Could you help describe why this is such a big deal and why it should be something that's top of mind for leaders in general?
So JourneyTrack has been now around for a little over 4 years, right? In the 4 years, right when we launched with 15 enterprises, big companies. Among them was Google as our core sort of set of customers. And so we've been able to observe over time sort of some opportunity areas, green space areas where people weren't, the data to its fullest potential, right? And so in our conversations over the last year with customers and even with new prospects, people who were leaving our competitors, part of the challenge has been, I think, is as this new movement of tools to really at least have like one central place where all that customer strategy lives and customer data lives. There had to be a better way to pull things out. And people, would spend a lot of time, making sure that, everything's in and using that to start to create presentations. But then that heavy lift was happening. Just like one of the things that we did early on was create the workshop feature so that you could just kind of let a click of a button, run them and, put them in. We wanted to do the flip on the other side, which is like, hey, you don't have all this data in here. You've been collecting it. We integrate with a lot of different systems of records. We have all that data. The biggest challenge people do is when they get asked, hey, I need you to create a presentation about, the end-to-end experience on XYZ or, whatever it is. And so in the mortgage process or, in healthcare, clinical trial, in pharma, clinical trial process, and what is that experience like for a patient, et cetera, et cetera. So oftentimes people then really struggle there because then it was like trying to pull together that story was just painful for them. And I just, I coached a bunch, and we're talking not just like junior people, we're talking about executives who just really even struggle with that, right? Telling the story to their C-suite, their boardroom, of what the outcomes of the work that their team had been doing is sort of coming down to, and why they needed to get this additional funding. And so that's how storytelling AI was born, right? What it does and what it helps people do is it creates a PowerPoint, right? That basically tells a story, and you define the audience. You say, hey, this is for Mark. He's a swell guy. He's smart. He's a numbers guy, and he's charismatic, and you gotta tell him stories, whatever it is, and so you define a little bit of that sort of who that reader is, that persona for the reader, who's your stakeholder, if you will, and then maybe you, Mark, might like some additional industry best practices, benchmarks. I don't know, some other data. They could upload new data that's not already in there. They may already have that, and so that might help them with here's the financial reports, here's this, here's that, here's our annual report. This is like his last document to the team, etc. So it's written in their style, which is great. Then what the system will do, it'll go through and like it'll create a PowerPoint that starts with building empathy, right? Saying, here's the story of who is affected by these, by this specific blips in mortgage, let's say, journey, if you will. And because of it, we're having 40% drop in completion of mortgage applications. That amounts to XYZ revenue for the and our possibility. And there's some real pains here. So it starts with that story to tell, and then critical points where maybe there's too much information being asked or something's happened breaking down. They know about it. It's documented. There's research to back it up, competitive assessments, whatever it is you've done as a business. And now you're like trying to move that forward, right? And so it goes through that. It says, here's the pains in the journey. Here's the reasons why this just goes beyond this persona, and this is what the impact to the business is. Like, here's how much it does. And, obviously this is based on what's in what you've put into JourneyTrack. It doesn't add new data. It doesn't create data for you. We've done a lot of testing to our best of our ability. Of course, there's always edge cases, but obviously we want to be able to create trust to the folks using our systems, right? And so net, it'll do that, and then I'll say, here's the recommendations you already have in play, and this is the prioritization. This is why, because it has maybe like a high customer value and a high business value, and their like effort is low, and so here's some initial low-hanging fruit, and here's some secondary things, and here's the plan, short-term strategy, long-term strategy. And then it ends the story with like, hey, this isn't just the story of just one guy or one set of people. This is like, again, the cost of not doing is this. This is what the impact of you not doing this. So it kind of, obviously every presentation is different, but that's the cadence it kind of goes through, and just making sure that it creates that empathy arc to act now, because act now is, there's some stuff, and it helps them get started. It's by no means is it supposed to be the final presentation, but from there you can take it and like at least have guardrails and a little bit of kind of like the end marks of where you want to tell the story, and then add pictures and make it more, you put it into your own template. Obviously most people do, right? Right now it's just in a generic JourneyTrack kind of template, but you would obviously change it to yours and kind of move from there.
I love that. Wow, there is just a lot to unpack on what you just shared. So many points of help there for a leader who's trying to make an impact, even all the way to spoon feeding them with the PowerPoint presentation kind of template built for them. I want to read from something that you and your organization had shared in a paper, which is going to be in the show notes, called Using Storytelling Playbooks to Supercharge Journey Management. We'll provide you with access to that in the show notes. But what you said was journey management thrives on data, interactions, metrics, KPIs, but data doesn't inspire action on its own. Stories do. And you said when a CX team simply presents 29% of customers drop off after onboarding, it's a statistic. When they pair it with a narrative, Maya, a new customer, signed up with excitement but felt lost navigating the dashboard and gave up after 2 frustrating attempts. The problem becomes visceral, and the need for change becomes urgent.
Yeah. We find, obviously, this is, stories have been told since the beginning of time, right? And
right.
But it takes an art to tell the story so that executives kind of understand the impact of no action, right? You do still have the executives that are very much like, start with the numbers, forget the story, and that's okay too, because we can work with that too. But what those in the room remember is like, hey, remember this story. And so obviously, our customers sometimes layer in some additional things to tell that. But yeah, the power of a story is it really plays to their memory of the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, and I think that, when you talk about storytelling and why you said what they remember, it reminded me of the book Made to Stick by the Heath brothers, where they talk about this Velcro theory of memory, which is like our memory is full of hooks and loops, and there's the logical side and the emotional side. And when you tell a story, you connect the two sides of the brain so that it creates this sticky Velcro type memory that we have of the experience. So to the extent that the tool can help us with the storytelling piece, that's magic.
Yeah, the hook and sort of that Velcro and the Velcro theory of memory, if you will, that metaphor, it's so powerful, right? I just, I think that when you think about like the broader frameworks around that too, and sometimes people use success model. I don't know if you've heard of that, which is like
sure.
simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it really shifts. It really shows. And I've seen it really play in. I had a client one time that had their team bring in like an executive training around this, and it shifted the whole, like the way that they started to put together presentations, and it was amazing to see. Honestly, that's the first time I was exposed to this. I mean, it's been whatever 10 plus years, but it's interesting. I always find it really inspiring, and I always share with clients, hey, you might want to think about this if you're struggling in this area.
So, Anya, let's just say starting out, and I have acquired the journey mapping tool, JourneyTrack tool, and explain to me how I'm going to end up with a story at the end. So am I adding in information from other sources? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So the basis of this new category of tools, right? It's newer, right? Forrester is basically putting together the first wave on what now is termed journey management. There used to be the typical journey mapping tools. Oftentimes people right after COVID started, to your point, it was stickies before, then COVID happened. We all went to Miro or FigJam or some version of that, right? To create this digital whiteboard spaces. Confluence has one too within Jira. The whole point there was to move to something where people can, interact and vote and understand that journey. Well, as these new tools were born and courting us right around that time, the thinking there, and we were the first to sort of do this, we were the first to put in Jira integration, right? We thought like, hey, they're going to have actions and results of the work, right? I own an all consultancy that's pretty large called Key Lime Interactive, and we had been working with a lot of clients over the last, at that point, 15, 12 years and whatever it is, and change. Now it's been 16. But the whole point was like, we need a place where not only, like we need to be able to structure this, because at scale, there's no way to scale like the mirror boards and like the FigJam. It's constantly going to get outdated. And then we got to be able to track things, right? We got to be able to track to see things. So at the very preliminary thing was like, let's create a structured way to create this, so that people can connect it. They can create micro journeys from it. They can like look at that whole, it's not just one thing sitting here in one workspace and another one over there and another one over here. They're now all connected. You can kind of pull it together, because oftentimes what we see is there's a lot of disjointed moment of truths that happen between phases, between teams that are interacting. So if people only own parts of the journey, it really breaks down. That's why we as customers experience a really poor experience, right? And that sort of is oftentimes where the breaks happen, right? So we wanted somewhere that they can, that siloism would sort of reduce itself, where we can have one place. And we started with Jira. We said we're going to do that. That's part of the core functions. And that really started to build that. And that literally was like at the beginning of this whole thing. From there, we're like, okay, we want to bring in other data, voice of customer data, right? We want to be able to start tying metrics. So those types of data, as we did Qualtrics, we have Medallia now, we have Forsta, and we have others coming in too now. And then we said, okay, well, that's great. Now, the next level of this is we want to add in maybe some operational financial data. Okay, let's do this in Snowflake integration. And that's sort of the next level, okay? And by the way, all along this, we always had pointers. Even if you didn't have the data integrated, we had pointers to things like Power BI, Tableau, the Figma, designs, and maybe some videos as we're on YouTube. So we have like about 15 simple integrations that are like, at least give you awareness that there's data over there that's relevant to this journey, right? So it's like a little iframe. It gives you a preview, but doesn't actually bring in the data. All of us do the same thing. It's not something that's unique to just us. That's the way like we can handle simple integrations. But the more complex two-way integrations became with Jira, became the VOC stuff. So we're pulling data. You tell us what cadence you want us to pull that data. Maybe it's hourly, maybe it's daily, maybe whatever it is when you open it up. And then Snowflake came in, and now analytics is coming in. So like, Adobe Analytics and Google Analytics really is sort of at the initial prompt of that, so that we can bring in some of that data as well. And then obviously along the way, we were also early to bring in some AI assisted. So like from the beginning, we had the recommendation AI. So that was an early version of things. But now as time's progressed, this is how we get along, right? We continue to build out. And so storytelling AI was that as people just had data in there, they were having a hard time like pulling together. And we hear oftentimes, you hear a lot of people say, they got to learn how to read the financials for them to be able to tell the ROI story. And some people just don't get that. And honestly, even if they did, they just wouldn't be able to articulate it because it's not the way they think. And so we wanted to give them a way to get to that ROI story without having to do that, right? Oftentimes, this is the kind of stuff that my consultancy would do. It's amazing what this tool now can do and what AI can assist with, right? And so we wanted to do that and create a lot more value, because if otherwise it just sits as a repository, and that's not what we are intending, right? And as we move from like AI assisted to agentic, where we're going to have even more scalability, right? That's sort of the bigger next play. We want to make sure that it makes it easy for people to not have to have updates. It becomes a lot more autonomous.
So really, it takes a look at the whole ecosystem of the customer, and it's looking at data from all these different sources that begin to tell the story of the customer's lives. So you're not just looking at either this is where customers are falling off, or this is the percentage of customers that are falling off after onboarding, but that this is the story of their lives. This is what we know about them. Here's a quote from Erica, who is typical of someone going through this particular friction point. And this is the risk to the organization. This is the risk in terms of churn. This is the risk in terms of revenue at risk.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Exactly. There's exactly. You're right.
So you're translating everyday life and the life of the customer into business outcomes that the C-suite really cares about.
Right, exactly. They want, every industry is losing customers. They're trying to figure out how to not lose customers in this economy. They want to figure out how, that's even more important than ever, right? So how to retain things, but even getting them to start from an early on, that experience is important, right? Because sometimes, like SaaS companies, for example, if they don't deliver a great experience in the first, I think it was like 90 days, like people tend to leave like 60%, as I think is the stat. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And that's painful to go through, getting a customer and then like losing them, in the first 90 days because you've had really poor onboarding or usage is bad or whatever it is. And we work with some SaaS companies, pretty large ones, that have really big problems like that.
Well, so what's next if somebody was interested in having this tool and being able to tell the story of their customers' lives to their executive team and get the leverage, the PowerPoint that it generates for you? What would be the next step? Yeah,
I mean, I think for us, it's, if you go to our website, you can request a little more of a demo, right? For us, there's an easy way to set up a time. There's a free basic one. It does not include storytelling in it. So you'll have to kind of connect with us to see that in action, if you will. We do have links to like little videos of how it works. And so if you're interested in just looking at it that way, that's enough. But if you want to try it, we have, different trial and pilot programs that we can have you be part of. And of course, we'll welcome you as a customer too, if that's what you want to move forward. If you find, we have customers that never even go through pilots or trials because of, it's going to take them just as long to do that and then to just get going. And so teams are like, yep, we set up their demo to be exactly their data in there. And then they're like, yep, that looks exactly like what we would have done. Okay, that looks good. Let's move forward. And that happens at the big ones, but not always. But it's sometimes there, and it's interesting. And it's worked fine for us with with our retention year to year. But the people get in there and they see this. I will tell you this specific feature is really a game, and I hate to use game changer because it's such a like overused word, but like it is. I really feel I've been doing this work for nearly 25 years, I think now. And I have seen, and I've managed teams of 100 plus easily, right? So my other team is 70. I used to manage at IBM. I've seen a lot of things. And this is interesting because this shifts the dynamics. It's amazing, guys. I'm so like, still like, honestly, it's moving fast. That's the thing. What's interesting as a technologist and engineer at heart and sort of, went to school for engineering. I never would imagine that we would be moving this quickly. Right now, the things you can do quickly, it's so it's so phenomenal.
Moving quickly, but at the same time, we've got to make those connections emotionally to leadership. And what a great tool, what a great assist for leaders who are trying to make that impact.
Yeah. I think there's always got to be, for no matter how much we move with technology, we're always going to have to connect that story. We're always going to have to be the ones that really pulls together the real strategic, sort of impact conversation. We might get assisted and get some ideas going and things like that. But I think what we as humans are capable of is amazing. And I think that we are a lot more knowledgeable of all these other things that I think for now anyways, make us such great people to really just tell a story.
Excellent. Ania, thank you so much. Again, this information will be available on the show notes. If you haven't seen a demo of the tool, I've seen it. Incredibly impressive. And with the ability to do storytelling, boy, it can just make your life so much easier if you're trying to make that impression on the executive team. I'm going to add, we got to land the plane now, but I want to ask you the same question I ask all my guests on the show to end the show, which is, what delights you as a customer?
I'm all about small little things that you do. I don't need big things. That's the nice thing. My husband got me this little thing that it sits on my desk, which is like this little heart thing, and I just look at it every day, and it's sweet. It's not like, I don't need this like expensive jewelry. So I'm all about the little things. I'm a very little things person. You make those little touch points and make me feel special, and that's all you need.
Excellent. How sweet and romantic of your husband.
Yeah. He's good at that. That's why I knew he was a keeper. Over 20 years ago now at this point, but yeah.
Excellent. Well, Ania, thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Delighted Customers podcast. It would mean so much if you would take a moment to subscribe. You can go to Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Click on the plus sign or follow button, and that will ensure that you don't miss an episode, and it helps get the word out to others. While you're there, I'd love it if you'd leave a 5-star review. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday.